we are joining Fredo, and we're very grateful for him including us in the celebrations. For us, the younger generation is what is the leader of the School of African Art Music, that it's still with us, and he will be for a long time, but he's the one to teach the way to the generation that is picking up on this repertoire.
You'll do better than I am. So
we're doing things differently because we are different and we have different backgrounds as well. But
that is true.
You are the person we all learn from. So
yeah, mistakes and all. Diana, let's do some business. So you want to just schmooze this wonderful, beautiful, talented lady called Rebeca.
Well, I am curious, Rebecca, as I am English and lived in London for many years. I'm curious about what was the impetus for starting the African Concert Series in London, and what was the reception to it?
All started from my releasing an album of piano works by African composers in 2018. When the CD came out in 2018, the media, the reaction to the recording was beyond my expectations, and it led from success to success. And that's when I was contacted by someone who was interested in programming some music from the CD. But when the concert the audience was sold out, and there were also journalists, reviewers, people that people that never even went to classical concerts, but they came to that concert because it was announced the first concert of an African Concert Series. It was overwhelming, and gradually the rest of the concerts sold out as well. And that's when I realized this was a chance to bring this music fully. This was a platform.
Tell me a little bit about your repertoire of Professor Nketia's work that you play, and what the reception was to his work specifically.
When I first started playing African music, I mainly focused on Nigerian composers. Fredo was at the border of Nigerian Ghanaian, but I was always consider him Nigerian because he's also from Delta, where I am from. So
we're practically neighbors, my mother's area. And
yes, we are neighbors.
Yeah, we practically, very much neighbors.
Yes. So I first was in contact with music from Nigeria, Ghana, and gradually I started also playing Professor Nketia's music. We hope to create a pattern, to create a tradition of how this music needs to be performed. And I am still discovering, and I'm still learning also about Professor Nketia's piano works, because they might appear simple at first sight, but they're not. They are not. It would be so much easier to play a Beethoven sonata than to play Nketia's pedagogical pieces. So,
and is that because of the rhythmic component or the dissonance component, or what is it that makes his music challenging when you come from a Western background?
It's the rhythms, the phraseology. It's not so much the harmonical language, because at least the Nketia's pedagogical pieces, they're first introductory to the rhythms and the melodies from Ghana, from the different tribes he writes from. But it's more about the approach to the score, because the way you play the scores themselves, they're not edited in such a way to really tell you where the accents will be placed, or where the phrase, the intonation of each phrase should be played, or how it should be sung. So you have to discover it while also researching the repertoire and gradually learning it. And I discovered recently with the very famous Volta Fantasy, that I had been listening to some recordings, some pianists, and it's a very beautiful piece, and it becomes like a earworm. And once you get used to a certain way of how it's played, and then you go to the score yourself, and you start seeing some things a bit differently, you have to relearn it all over again, because it's not the same piece you thought it was. And I think this is fascinating. Of course, it's a challenge, but it's as with any piece we're learning, as with any musical genre we're learning, or any style. The same that happens with the Western classical music, where you learn how to play Beethoven, then you go to Romantic era, you go to Impressionistic era. That's the same with African art music. You have to learn how to play the music based off the country the composer is from, because it's completely different. And as a huge parallel, the way composers from West Africa wrote in a certain style, the ones from North Africa wrote in a completely different tradition. A completely different tradition, even though it's considered still Africa. So with research and with events like this, commemoration concerts, we are creating thanks to Fredo and Wendy's work, we are creating a tradition of how this music should be performed, and we are also learning. With me personally, I'm discovering every day with every work new rhythms and new style of performing.
I can also add a couple of things that I think have really helped me. Of course, flute is so tied to voice. We share so many similarities in how you're breathing and how you're producing your tone and how you sing your phrases. And for me, having the opportunity being a part of Songs of Africa since its inception in 1994, with the St. Louis African Chorus, and I have sung in so many African languages. And just that experience gives me a huge advantage in terms of how do I interpret instrumental classical African art music, just because, I've sung a lot of Ghanaian music in the case of Nketia, but we sang music from, I don't know how many African countries total, Fred.
All over.
20, maybe more, in countless languages. I haven't done the tally, but that is a huge advantage for me. And then one thing that Rebeca is talking about, this spending time learning the style. It's not just playing the notes on the page, right? You listen to the recordings and then you say, I'm looking at the score, but it's different when they're actually playing it. A similar example is when you look at jazz written on the page, right? It doesn't tell you how to swing, does it? It'll say swing or straight. You have to know what that means. And so if just knowing that, that's one example of how a musical score can be interpreted much differently compared to what you're looking at on the page. That's just one example, and you can imagine that the African rhythms are the same way. If you know the root of the music traditions and you do some time to research that, as Rebeca has, it makes all the difference in the world when you're actually doing that interpretation.
So, you have all researched African music, traveled through Africa. You now feel it. You know what you're trying to achieve. But when you're working with an orchestra like the St. Louis Symphony Orchestra, where most of the musicians have no experience of what you've done, the research that you've done, how difficult is it to get a huge orchestra on the same page as you?
That is a really good question, Diana. Wendy, you want to speak to that real quick?
I wouldn't say that I blame classical musicians for, these difficulties. It's our training. Rebeca came up in the same conservatory training. We are trained to play Western classical music. We are not trained to know how to do this work. It's a passion project that each one of us took on our own time. And sometimes our professors are supportive of that work when you're in these these conservatories, and sometimes they're not. I had both experiences. I was so grateful, that my teachers at LSU were supportive of my dissertation. And Rebeca also just finished her graduate paper as well. And, it makes all the difference in the world if you have professors who are supportive of this work. So a lot of musicians, they especially symphony musicians, they work hard to get that symphony job, and it's not required to be able to play different styles other than classical music to get that job. So they've worked very hard to get there. I don't begrudge them that at all. And it's just a matter of, are they willing to open their brains up to this different style and try something different?
Right. I mean, I know it's not their fault, but I mean, when you're trying to learn a piece of music and you're standing there with this big orchestra, I mean, some people are going to have more of a natural feeling for it, and some aren't. But you've got to get everybody on the same page to play it well. I mean, just how challenging is that? Does it work, or do you think?
Well, we've had orchestra concerts with our Festival of African and African American Music, and a lot of it comes down to rehearsal time, giving extra rehearsal time. You have to give the musicians extra time, giving them meaties to listen to and asking them to listen to this in advance, just to give them extra time to let these rhythms and styles soak into their ear, because it does take that extra listening time. Having a great conductor who can lead them through, that's so key. And then having a score that really is well marked with articulations and up bow, down bow, just because that's what classical musicians are so used to, interpreting what's on the page. So spending that time as the composer to make sure the score has enough information is very helpful.
Right. Rebecca, have you worked with any big orchestras in the UK playing Nketia's work or other African art music?
No. We've only worked on chamber music. Chamber music is the biggest ensemble we've programmed so far, but the aim is to reach further.
And we've worked very successfully. I'm sorry, Rebecca, go ahead.
No, that's. I wanted to say that hopefully we will, and we are planning to expand to bigger ensembles and later orchestras.
Fred, you want to speak with working with Maestro Hodgkins at Coro, because that's been such a successful example of a Western orchestra successfully playing this music.
Yeah, Diana, to your question about symphony musicians is that, as Wendy shared, they're so in tune with 2 rehearsals and perform. 2 rehearsals, perform.
Maybe 3.
Maybe 3.
Oh my goodness.
And they can do that for Beethoven, they can do that for Debussy, they can do that for Brahms, Tchaikovsky, whatever, because they're playing it every year. It's the same thing. So you can get away with 2 or 3 rehearsals. But then when the music is new from a different cultural perspective, they don't get our push that, as Wendy said, listen to the MIDI, rehearse more, 2 or 3 won't do it. They just don't get it. So, union rules, we only have 2 rehearsals. It doesn't work.
It's budget too. It's budget. It's going to take a bigger budget.
It's a learning curve. So now with David Hodgkins, Maestro Hodgkins, I love partnering with him because not only he is one of the best conductors of our time, he has a connection with his musicians, and they are able to put in the time. That is what it takes to really understand this music. If orchestra musicians will put in the time. And as Wendy said, if they have a conductor that will motivate them to understand. Folks, this is culturally different. You need to put in the time. 2, 3 rehearsals won't do it. We need to budget for 4, 5, or even more rehearsal to do justice to this music. So that's the next level, hopefully, that we can get to.